Captain Jake Morrison was having what he considered a perfectly normal Tuesday morning, which meant he was hauling 3,000 gallons of premium Colombian coffee blend to the Mars colonies while listening to classic rock and wondering why anyone thought living on a red dust ball was a good idea. His cargo ship, the Caffeinated Dreams, wasn't much to look at. Hell, it wasn't much to fly either, but it got the job done, and Jake had never met a problem that couldn't be solved with enough coffee and creative cursing. That's when the aliens showed up. The first sign something was wrong came when his radio crackled to life with what sounded like someone gargling mouthwash while reading a phone book. Jake turned down his music and frowned at the communications panel. "This is Captain Morrison of the Caffeinated Dreams to whoever's making that god-awful noise. You're interrupting my very important delivery of liquid motivation to some very cranky Mars colonists, so this better be good." The gargling stopped. A moment later, a voice that sounded like it had been run through a translator that had given up halfway through spoke with the kind of pompous authority usually reserved for parking meter attendants and middle managers. "Pitiful human vessel, you will cease your insignificant activities immediately. I am Commander Vex Tal of the Galactic Dominion Fleet, and I hereby demand the unconditional surrender of your pathetic species." Jake blinked. He looked out his viewport and noticed for the first time that Earth was currently surrounded by what appeared to be several hundred ships that looked like someone had crossed a cathedral with a cheese grater and then painted the whole thing an unfortunate shade of purple. "Well," Jake said, taking a sip of his coffee, "that's new. Down on Earth." On Earth, humanity's reaction to the alien invasion was about what you'd expect from a species that had spent the last century arguing about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. The aliens had apparently expected terror, submission, maybe some dramatic speeches about the indomitable human spirit. Instead, they got a planet full of people treating them like they were trying to extend their car warranty. Commander Vextal's demands for surrender were met with everything from bureaucratic hold music to one particularly creative individual who rickrolled the entire invasion fleet. The aliens found themselves dealing with customer service representatives who transferred them between 17 different departments before finally connecting them to someone who informed them that Earth's surrender department was currently closed for lunch. Jake, meanwhile, was still trying to figure out how this had become his problem. He'd been minding his own business, delivering coffee like a responsible citizen, when suddenly he was apparently humanity's unofficial first contact representative. "Commander Vex, what's it?" Jake said into his radio. "I'm sure you're very important where you come from, but I've got a delivery schedule to keep. These Mars colonists haven't had decent coffee in 3 weeks, and trust me, that's a humanitarian crisis waiting to happen. So either help me deliver this coffee, or take a number and wait in line like everyone else." There was a long pause. Then Commander Vextal's voice came back, and if Jake didn't know better, he'd swear the alien sounded confused. "Did you just tell the commander of a galactic invasion fleet to take a number?" "Buddy, I've told bigger jerks than you to take a number. You want to conquer Earth? Fine. Fill out the proper forms, submit them to the appropriate authorities, and wait for processing like everyone else. But right now, I've got coffee to deliver, and that takes priority over your little space tantrum." And that's how Jake Morrison, caffeine delivery specialist, accidentally became the first human to hang up on an alien invasion. 3 days later, the aliens had apparently decided that formal diplomacy was the way to go, which meant the United Nations got to host the most awkward first contact in galactic history. Ambassador Krill arrived at the UN building in New York with all the pomp and circumstance of someone who had clearly never dealt with human bureaucracy before. Rebecca Walsh, the UN's chief administrative officer, and a woman who could weaponize paperwork like some people weaponized nuclear materials, sat across from the 7-foot-tall purple alien with the kind of smile that made seasoned diplomats break out in cold sweats. "Ambassador Krill," Rebecca said, her voice carrying the sweet, deadly tone of someone who had perfected the art of killing with kindness. "Welcome to Earth. I trust your accommodations at the Marriott were satisfactory." Krill's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which Rebecca had learned was the alien equivalent of a confused stare. "You housed me in a commercial lodging establishment." Still. "Oh yes, we have very strict protocols for visiting dignitaries." I hope you enjoyed the continental breakfast. I specifically requested they include those little Danish paste you can never quite figure out how to eat. The alien reached into what appeared to be a briefcase made from crystallized starlight and pulled out a document that shimmered with an otherworldly authority. Human Walsh, I present to you the Galactic Subjugation Treaty. Your species will sign this document acknowledging your status as a subordinate race under Galactic Dominion authority. Rebecca accepted the treaty with the kind of reverence most people reserved for junk mail. She flipped through it, occasionally making small humming noises that suggested she was finding the whole thing moderately amusing. This is very interesting, Ambassador. I particularly like Clause 47, where it states that humans must provide tribute in the form of our most valuable resources. However, I'm afraid there are a few issues with the formatting. Formatting? Oh yes, very important. You see, this document isn't properly notarized, and you've used the wrong font. UN regulations clearly state that all diplomatic documents must be submitted in Times New Roman, 12-point font, double-spaced, with 1-inch margins. This appears to be in some sort of alien script that our systems can't process. Krill Orth's translator made a sound like a computer having a nervous breakdown. But this is written in the universal diplomatic language of the Galactic Dominion. I'm sure it is, but unfortunately, our systems require standardized formatting. I'll need you to resubmit this in the proper format, along with 3 notarized copies and a processing fee of $50. Processing fee? Standard administrative charge. We accept cash, check, or credit card. No alien currency, I'm afraid. Banking regulations. While Krill Orth was trying to figure out how to pay a processing fee with what appeared to be crystallized light, Rebecca was preparing humanity's counteroffer. She slid a thick document across the table with the kind of satisfaction that came from years of making people's lives difficult through proper channels. This is our counter-proposal. The Terra Dominion Mutual Cooperation Agreement. I think you'll find our terms quite reasonable. Krill Orth opened the document and began reading. His 4 eyes started blinking rapidly, which Rebecca was pretty sure meant he was having some kind of breakdown. You want us to observe something called Casual Friday? Oh yes. Very important for morale. Every Friday, all Galactic Dominion personnel stationed on Earth must wear casual clothing. No formal military uniforms allowed. And this clause about mandatory participation in office birthday parties? Standard human custom. When any human celebrates their birthday, all alien personnel must attend and participate in the singing of the traditional birthday song. Cake consumption is optional but encouraged. What is this secret Santa program? Holiday tradition. Every December, all aliens must participate in our gift exchange program. Budget limit is $25 per gift, and you're not allowed to buy gift cards. By the time Krill Orth reached the clause about mandatory participation in Earth's annual tax filing procedures, his translator had started making sounds that Rebecca was pretty sure weren't supposed to come from any known technology. These terms are completely unreasonable, Krill Orth finally managed. Rebecca smiled the kind of smile that had launched 1,000 HR complaints. Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Would you like to speak to my supervisor? And that's how humanity's first diplomatic contact turned into a customer service nightmare that would haunt alien bureaucrats for generations to come. When diplomacy failed, which everyone except the aliens had seen coming from about a light year away, the Commander Vextal decided it was time to show these primitive humans what real galactic warfare looked like. Unfortunately for him, nobody had bothered to explain to the humans that they were supposed to be primitive. General Patricia Tank Rodriguez received the alien declaration of war while she was in the middle of her morning workout, which meant she was already in the perfect mood to deal with pompous extraterrestrial wannabe conquerors. Tank had earned her nickname not because she drove tanks, but because she had the personality of one and the subtlety of a freight train carrying fireworks. Let me get this straight, Tank said, reading the formal declaration of war that had been delivered by what appeared to be a floating crystal that spoke in lawyer. You're declaring war on Earth because we won't sign your stupid treaty. The crystal pulsed with what Tank assumed was indignation. The Galactic Dominion does not make stupid treaties, primitive human. We offer you one final chance to surrender before we demonstrate the overwhelming superiority of our military technology. Tank looked around her office, which was decorated with commendations, pictures of explosions, and a coffee mug that read "World's okayest General." Then she looked back at the floating crystal and grinned the kind of grin that made enemy combatants reconsider their life choices. "You know what, Sparkles? I accept your declaration of war, but I hope you brought your A game, because we've been practicing." The first alien attack came at dawn, which was their second mistake. Their first mistake had been assuming humans would fight fair. Commander Vextal's invasion fleet descended on Earth's major cities, ready to demonstrate their superior firepower and advanced tactics. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that had apparently weaponized everything from household appliances to children's toys. The battle for New York involved humans launching garbage trucks at alien fighters using modified construction cranes. The aliens retaliated with energy weapons that could level city blocks, only to discover that New Yorkers treated energy weapons like they treated everything else in their city, as a minor inconvenience that might make them 5 minutes late for work. In Los Angeles, the aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that had somehow turned traffic jams into tactical advantages. Every time they tried to establish a foothold, they'd find themselves stuck behind a line of cars that stretched to the horizon, with humans leaning out their windows to offer them directions to the nearest Starbucks. But it was in Houston where things got really weird. Jake Morrison had been trying to deliver his coffee to Mars when the shooting started. His ship was caught between Earth and the Red Planet when alien fighters started buzzing around him like angry space wasps. Jake did what any reasonable person would do in his situation. He cursed loudly, spilled coffee on his control panel, and accidentally activated his emergency jettison system. 3,000 gallons of premium Colombian coffee blend hit the alien dreadnought at approximately 15,000 miles per hour. The explosion was visible from 3 planets. "Holy shit," Jake said, watching the alien ship turn into what appeared to be a very expensive fireworks display. "I didn't know coffee was explosive." His radio crackled to life with General Rodriguez's voice. "Morrison, what the hell did you just do?" "I think I just accidentally declared war on the alien fleet with a caffeine-based weapon of mass destruction." "Outstanding. Can you do it again? I mean, I've got more coffee." And that's how Jake Morrison, space trucker and accidental weapons specialist, became the first human to win a space battle using nothing but premium coffee and poor impulse control. Meanwhile, Commander Vextal was having what he would later describe as the worst day of his military career. His forces had been expecting to face primitive weapons and basic tactics. Instead, they were dealing with an enemy that seemed to have no concept of conventional warfare. The human fighters were using garbage trucks as assault vehicles. Their capital ships appeared to be converted cruise liners with weapons systems that looked like they'd been assembled by someone who'd read about space combat in a magazine and decided to improve on the basic concept. "Report," Vextal demanded from his command ship. "Sir, the humans have somehow turned their communication satellites into weapons platforms. They're broadcasting something called death metal at frequencies that are causing our navigation systems to malfunction. And our ground forces. They're pinned down by enemy forces using what appear to be modified food trucks as mobile command centers. The humans are simultaneously feeding their troops and launching coordinated attacks. It's militarily impossible, but they're doing it anyway." Vextal stared at the tactical display, watching his superior military force get systematically outmaneuvered by a species that had apparently decided the rules of warfare were more like guidelines. "How," he asked the universe in general, "are we losing to these people?" The universe, as usual, didn't answer. But if it had, it probably would have mentioned that humans had spent the last few thousand years perfecting the art of turning anything into a weapon, and that asking them to fight fair was like asking water to flow uphill. After 3 weeks of what historians would later call the most ridiculous war in galactic history, both sides were forced to admit that they had reached a stalemate. The aliens couldn't conquer Earth because humans refused to follow any logical military protocols, and humans couldn't defeat the aliens because, technically, the aliens did have superior technology. They just weren't very good at using it against an enemy that treated warfare like an extreme sport. That's when someone, and nobody would ever admit who, suggested a prisoner exchange program. The idea was that maybe if both sides got to know each other better, they could find some common ground. It was the kind of optimistic thinking that usually led to disaster, which meant it was perfect for the current situation. The first batch of alien prisoners arrived at a facility in Nevada that had been hastily converted from a defunct casino. The humans figured if they were going to house alien prisoners, they might as well do it somewhere that already had experience dealing with people making questionable life choices. Captain Zixandra of the Dominion Third Fleet found herself sharing a cell with what appeared to be a primitive entertainment system that the humans called a television. She had been warned about human torture devices, but this seemed relatively benign until she accidentally activated something called reality TV. 12 hours later, she was completely obsessed with a show called The Real Housewives of Atlanta. "I don't understand," she said to her cellmate. "Commander Yurth, okay, why does Teresa not simply eliminate her enemies with plasma weapons? I think the humans have rules about that, but she has legitimate grievances. On my world, table flipping is considered a formal declaration of war." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, human prisoners were having their own cultural experiences. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, no relation to General Tank Rodriguez but equally sarcastic, had been captured during the battle for Denver and was currently being held on what the aliens called a comfort vessel, which was apparently their version of a luxury prison. "Let me get this straight," Mike said to his alien guard. "A 7-foot-tall purple creature called Warden Tothal. You guys invaded Earth because you need more planets for your galactic empire, but you can't figure out how to make decent coffee." "Coffee is not a requirement for galactic domination," Tothal replied stiffly. "Have you tried coffee?" "I do not consume primitive human beverages." Mike pulled out a small package he'd been saving for emergencies. "Look, I've got some instant coffee here. Just try it. What's the worst that could happen?" 20 minutes later, Warden Tothal was experiencing his first caffeine high and questioning every life choice that had led him to a career in galactic conquest. "This beverage," he said, his 4 eyes dilated to the size of dinner plates. "It makes me feel like I could conquer 17 star systems before lunch." Yeah, that's Tuesday morning for most humans. Now imagine what we're like when we're properly caffeinated. Back on Earth, the alien prisoners were becoming increasingly integrated into human society, mainly because humans had discovered that aliens were surprisingly good at reality TV commentary. Captain Zixandra had started a popular podcast called Alien Perspectives on Human Drama. That was getting millions of downloads. "Today we're discussing episode 12 of Love Island," she announced to her growing audience. "I remain confused by the humans' mating rituals. On my world, if you're interested in someone, you challenge them to single combat. This grafting behavior seems unnecessarily complicated." Meanwhile, Jake Morrison had become an accidental celebrity after his coffee-based destruction of the alien dreadnought. He was currently being interviewed by what appeared to be an alien news crew on a ship that looked like someone had crossed a television studio with a spaceship. "So, Captain Morrison," the alien interviewer said, "you destroyed one of our most advanced warships using a beverage?" "Well, technically it was 3,000 gallons of beverage moving at relativistic speeds, but yeah, basically. And this was intentional." "Hell no. I was just trying to deliver coffee to Mars. Your guys got in the way." "But you must have known that coffee could be used as a weapon." Jake paused, thinking about every Monday morning he'd ever experienced. You know what, in retrospect, that should have been obvious. The real breakthrough came when Ambassador Krylov, still struggling with UN bureaucracy, accidentally discovered human coffee during a particularly frustrating meeting with Rebecca Walsh. "I don't suppose," he said, looking at the stack of forms she'd just handed him, "you have anything that might help with the crushing despair of dealing with your administrative procedures." Rebecca smiled and poured him a cup of coffee. "Try this." One sip later, Krylov understood why humans had been so difficult to conquer. They weren't just running on determination and sarcasm. They were running on liquid motivation. "This," he said, staring at the coffee cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. "This is why you fight so hard." "No," Rebecca said. "This is why we function at all. We fight hard because we're naturally stubborn and too stupid to know when we're outgunned. I need to contact my superiors immediately." "Sure thing. But first you need to fill out forms 27B through 45C in triplicate, with proper notarization. And that's how humanity accidentally converted the Galactic Dominion to coffee addiction while simultaneously driving them insane with bureaucracy. Supreme Admiral Zorth UK of the Galactic High Command was having what he would later describe as the worst headache in the history of interstellar warfare. He had received reports from the Earth conflict that made no sense, violated every known principle of military engagement, and suggested that somehow both sides were losing a war to each other. His flagship, the inevitable Victory, dropped out of hyperspace near Earth to find a battle zone that looked like someone had tried to organize a fight between a demolition derby and a food festival. Human ships that appeared to be held together with duct tape and optimism were engaged in combat with Dominion vessels using tactics that hurt his brain to contemplate. A report he demanded from his aide, a competent officer named Sub-Admiral Keth Wren, who had the misfortune of being assigned to explain the unexplainable. "Sir, the situation is complicated." "Uncomplicated. The humans appear to have weaponized their entire civilization. Their cargo ships are armed with what they call coffee cannons. Their civilian vessels are launching what appear to be frozen pizzas at our fighters. And their military commanders are treating this like some sort of team-building exercise." South UK looked at the tactical display, where a ship labeled Caffeinated Dreams was currently engaged in what appeared to be a high-speed chase with 3 Dominion fighters while playing something called Yaki sax on all communication frequencies. "And our forces?" Commander Vextal is currently engaged in what he calls tactical negotiations with a human general who keeps asking him if he's filled out the proper forms for planetary invasion. Forms? Apparently humans have bureaucratized warfare. They require permits for everything, including surrender. Zorth UK felt a headache developing that he was pretty sure was going to be permanent. Get me a direct line to both commanding officers. And now, 5 minutes later, he found himself on a 3-way call with Commander Vextal and General Rodriguez, both of whom seemed to be treating the conversation like a customer service complaint. "Supreme Admiral," Vextal said, "I must report that these humans are impossible to conquer. They refuse to follow any logical military protocols." "That's because we're not trying to be logical," General Rodriguez interjected. "We're trying to win." "There's a difference. You can't win," Vextal protested. "We have superior technology, superior numbers, and superior tactical training." "Yeah, but we have superior coffee and superior sarcasm. Also, we don't care about your rules." Zorth UK interrupted before this could turn into another argument about proper military procedure. "Both of you, report to my flagship immediately. We're going to settle this like civilized beings. Do I need to bring forms?" General Rodriguez asked. "What forms?" "Proper documentation for intergalactic military tribunals. I assume you have the appropriate permits for conducting military justice in Earth's solar system." And that's when Zorth UK realized that the humans hadn't just been fighting the Galactic Dominion. They'd been systematically driving them insane with bureaucracy, caffeine addiction, and reality television. An hour later, Jake Morrison found himself aboard the most advanced ship in the Galactic High Command Fleet, carrying a pot of coffee and wondering how his life had gotten so weird. He'd been invited to what Supreme Admiral Zorth UK called a diplomatic resolution meeting, which Jake assumed was military speak for "we give up. Please make it stop." "Captain Morrison," Zorth UK said, accepting a cup of coffee with the reverence of someone who had heard legends. "I understand you're responsible for destroying one of our dreadnoughts with a caffeinated beverage." "That was an accident," Jake said. "I was just trying to make a delivery, and yet you succeeded where our most advanced tactical systems failed. You neutralized a capital ship using nothing but coffee and creative thinking." Jake shrugged. "I mean, it was really good coffee." Zorth UK took a sip and his expression changed from bureaucratic frustration to something approaching religious awakening. "This is incredible. How do you make it?" "Trade secret. But I'm willing to negotiate." That's when Rebecca Walsh walked in with a stack of papers that made war and peace look like a grocery list. "Gentlemen, I've prepared the paperwork for humanity's promotion to Galactic High Command status." "A promotion?" Zorth UK and Vextal said in unison. "Oh yes, very straightforward. You came here to conquer us, we refused to be conquered, and now you can't figure out how to end this war without losing face. Meanwhile, we've demonstrated superior tactical innovation, resource management, and cultural integration capabilities. According to Galactic High Command regulations, subsection 47C, that qualifies us for immediate promotion to command status. Zorth UK looked at the forms. These regulations don't exist, they do now. I wrote them myself. Very comprehensive. Jake's coffee program alone qualifies as a diplomatic breakthrough of the highest order. And that's how humanity talked their way into running the galaxy using nothing but paperwork, sarcasm, and really good coffee. 6 months later, the galaxy was discovering what it meant to be managed by humans, and the results were exactly as chaotic as you'd expect from a species that had turned coffee into a weapon of mass destruction. Supreme Coffee Admiral Jake Morrison, a title he'd never asked for but had learned to live with, was currently aboard his flagship, the caffeinated Dreams Mark VE, and delivering coffee to the Zephyrian system. The Zephyrians had been part of the Galactic Dominion for 3,000 years and were having trouble adjusting to their new human supervisors. "This is Admiral Morrison to Zephyrian Command," Jake said into his radio. "I've got your monthly coffee shipment. Where do you want me to dock?" "Admiral Morrison," came the reply in a voice that sounded like someone slowly losing their mind. "We are a proud warrior race with a military tradition spanning millennia. We do not require stimulating beverages to function." "Yeah, that's what the Dominion guys said. How'd that work out for them?" There was a long pause. "Please proceed to docking bay 7. And Admiral, could you possibly include some of those little sugar packets?" "Asking for a friend." Jake grinned. "No problem, buddy. First hit's always free." Meanwhile, Rebecca Walsh had been promoted to Director of Intergalactic Bureaucracy, which meant she was now in charge of the most powerful administrative system in the galaxy. Her office was located on what used to be the Galactic Dominion's capital ship, which she had renamed the Paperwork Palace just to annoy her former enemies. "Ambassador Krylloth," she said to her former diplomatic opponent, who was now her assistant, "I need you to process these applications for planetary membership in the human Commonwealth." Krylloth looked at the stack of papers with the kind of despair usually reserved for tax season. "Director Walsh, there are 47 different worlds applying for membership, and each application is 300 pages long." "I know. I wrote the application myself, very thorough. Did you remember to include the processing fees? You're charging planets to join the Commonwealth, standard administrative fee. 25,000 credits per application, plus a background check fee, plus the cost of the welcome basket." "Welcome basket." "A coffee, cookies, and a handbook explaining human customs. Very important for cultural integration." Found in what used to be the Dominion's military command center, General Rodriguez was conducting her morning briefing with what she insisted on calling her middle management team. This consisted of former alien commanders who had been demoted to regional supervisors and they were still trying to figure out how they'd ended up taking orders from a species they'd tried to conquer. "All right, people," Tank said, looking around the room at beings from 17 different worlds. "Let's go over this week's performance metrics. Vex Tal, how are we doing with the Kronos sector?" Former Commander Vex Tal, now Regional Manager Vex Tal, consulted his tablet with the kind of resignation that comes from accepting that your career has taken an unexpected turn. "The Kronos worlds are reporting a 17% increase in productivity since we implemented the mandatory coffee breaks." "Outstanding. What about morale?" "Surprisingly high. The workers seem to enjoy the coffee breaks, and the new policy allowing casual uniforms on Fridays has been well received." "Excellent. And the paperwork? All properly filed in triplicate, as per Director Walsh's requirements." Tank nodded approvingly. "This is what proper management looks like, people. The old Dominion tried to rule through fear and intimidation. We rule through coffee and comprehensive administrative procedures. They're much more effective." The Supreme Admiral Zorth UK, now Deputy Administrator for Galactic Operations, raised his hand. "General Rodriguez, I have a question about the new efficiency programs." "Shoot. Why do all our new policies involve either coffee or paperwork?" Tank grinned. "Because that's how humans work, Admiral. We run on caffeine and spite, and we've learned that the best way to control any situation is to make it so bureaucratically complicated that everyone just gives up and does what we want. But surely there must be more to human leadership than that." "Well, there's also sarcasm. Don't forget the sarcasm." Meanwhile, Jake was finishing his coffee delivery to the Zephyrian system and receiving what had become a typical response from newly human-managed worlds. "Admiral Morrison," the Zephyrian commander said, "I must admit, this coffee is extraordinary. Where did you learn to make it? Family recipe. My grandmother always said that good coffee was the foundation of civilization. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She also said that if you can't solve a problem with coffee, you're not using enough coffee. I'm beginning to understand why humans were so difficult to conquer. Jake looked out at the stars, thinking about how his simple life as a space trucker had somehow turned into managing coffee distribution for half the galaxy. You know what the funny thing is? What's that, Admiral? We never actually wanted to conquer anybody. We just wanted to be left alone to drink our coffee and complain about things. But you guys wouldn't let us do that, so we had to get creative, and now you rule the galaxy. Yeah, but we're still just drinking coffee and complaining about things. We're just doing it from bigger ships now. As Jake prepared to jump to his next delivery, he couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. Humanity had gone from being threatened with galactic conquest to running the galaxy, and they'd done it using nothing but bureaucracy, sarcasm, and really good coffee. The aliens had tried to rule them, but humans had done what humans do best. They'd promoted themselves to management, and then made everyone else fill out forms in triplicate. And honestly, Jake thought as he engaged his hyperdrive, that was probably the most human solution to an alien invasion that anyone could have come up with. The galaxy was now run by a species that had weaponized customer service and turned coffee into a diplomatic tool. The former conquerors had become middle managers, and the conquered had become the conquerors through the simple expedient of being too stubborn to lose and too sarcastic to take seriously. It wasn't the ending anyone had expected, but it was definitely the ending everyone deserved. This is Admiral Morrison, signing off, Jake said to the universe in general. Remember, folks, life's too short for bad coffee and too long for bad management. The coffee admiral out. And somewhere in the void between stars, the universe itself seemed to chuckle at the cosmic joke of it all.